Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're not a queen or a nurse or a flapper dancing through the roaring 20s with pearls and champagne. No, you're something far more radiant, literally. You're a radium girl, a teenager with steady hands and a smile they'll one day use in court to show how far your jaw has collapsed. You paint numbers on dials so soldiers can see in the dark, and they call you patriotic, graceful, delicate. They don't mention that every time you lick the brush to make the tip sharp, you're swallowing death in powdered form. But don't worry, it glows in the dark, and that's very fashionable. So before you settle in under the covers, joints aching, teeth loose, spine quietly dissolving, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love hearing where everyone is tuning in from, and if you want early access to more calmly narrated historical bedtime stories, plus other perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, there's a link to the Patreon below. But for now, close your eyes. Try not to think about what's glowing in your bones. Let's begin. It's 1917, and you're officially doing your part for the war effort. Not in the trenches, of course. You're a teenage girl, and they don't let you near the front lines. But that doesn't mean you're not useful. There's a factory down the road that says it needs nimble fingers and a steady hand. And really, what could be more American than helping the boys overseas see their watches in the dark? They're calling it victory work, patriotic, dignified, feminine. Plus, they're paying you more than you've ever seen in your life. Enough to help your family, buy nice shoes, maybe even start saving for your future. Assuming you get one. The building itself isn't much to look at. Bricks, dust, creaky windows that rattle when the train goes by. But inside, it's something else entirely. A kind of quiet magic. Girls just like you sit at long wooden tables, laughing, whispering, bent over tiny dials no bigger than a coin. There's paint, brushes, little tins of powder. The powder glows, faintly green, faintly otherworldly, like fireflies caught in a jar. They call it undark. Sounds like a perfume. Looks like moonlight. Smells like nothing at all. It gets on everything, of course. Your fingers, your clothes, your skin. But no one seems worried. If anything, they're proud. You're glowing when you go home, and that's not a metaphor. The job sounds almost too good to be true. Decent wages, short hours, and a little prestige thrown in for good measure. You're not working in a sweatshop stitching collars or standing on your feet for 12 hours in a department store. No, you're doing something scientific, something delicate, something important. You're a dial painter at the US Radium Corporation, and from the way the foreman talks, you're practically a national treasure. They don't say it quite like that, of course. They mostly say things like, hurry up, and make sure the numbers are even, but it's there underneath. You matter. You're helping the war, helping the boys in the trenches tell time without striking a match. And you get to sit while doing it, surrounded by other girls your age, chatting and laughing as you work. It doesn't feel like labour. It feels like luck. The factory's alive with rhythm. Not noise, the girls are too focused for that, but rhythm. Brushes tap against glass. Dials click softly into place. Tiny watch hands spin gently as they're mounted into their grooves. The room smells faintly of oil and tin, with a whisper of something chalky underneath. The radium powder, though no one ever calls it that. It's just the paint, and it's beautiful. Pale green when you open the tin, like powdered sea glass. Once it goes on the dial, it dries almost clear, but if you switch off the overheads, everything glows faintly, eerily, like the world is holding its breath. You and the other girls laugh sometimes, holding up your hands in the dark to see who's glowing brightest. You joke that it makes you look like fairies, or ghosts. No one says skeletons. At your station, there's a little routine you follow. You take the dial, always small, always fiddly, and you line up the brush just so. The numbers are thin, delicate, and precise. To get the paint on cleanly, you need a fine tip, sharper than the brush gives you on its own. So you do what everyone else does. You bring the brush to your lips, press it gently between them, and twist. The bristles bend into a perfect point. Then you dip, paint and repeat, over and over, hundreds of times a day. It's called lip pointing. They train you to do it in your first week. It's the only way to get the numbers right. Too clumsy otherwise. They don't mention that you're ingesting trace amounts of radioactive material every single time you do it. And even if they did, you'd probably keep doing it. You're getting paid by the piece. Time is money. Accuracy is everything. At first you think of the paint like glitter. It clings to everything. Your hands, your apron, the curls that escape your scarf and fall across your forehead. You wipe your brow, and now that glows too. By lunchtime, your sandwich glows faintly where your fingers touch the crust. You laugh about it with the others. The factory doesn't have a cafeteria. You bring your lunch in a pale or brown paper bag, and you eat together in clusters by the windows, brushing radium dust from your skirts and talking about boys or movies or what you'd do if the war ended tomorrow. Sometimes you paint your nails with the stuff just for fun. One of the girls even dotted it on her teeth once. She thought it'd make her smile, stand out more at a dance. It did. Everyone could see her grin from across the floor. The supervisors walk through now and then, clipboard in hand, nodding approvingly. They don't sit with you, don't glow like you do. They wear gloves sometimes when handling the powder, but that's just for neatness, they say. It has nothing to do with safety. And you believe them because why wouldn't you? These are the experts, the men who went to school for this sort of thing. If there were any danger, they'd tell you. They wouldn't just let a room full of teenage girls lick radioactive brushes all day. That would be absurd, irresponsible, criminal. No one wants to think too hard about it. There's a kind of sisterhood in the factory, a closeness that only comes from shared routine. You and the other girls sit shoulder to shoulder for hours each day, trading secrets between brushstrokes, whispering dreams over rows of ticking dials. Some of the girls are married already. Some are saving up for wedding dresses. Some are still in school, working after class to help out at home. It's a strange in-between space. Not quite childhood, not quite adulthood, but it feels stable. The work is tedious, sure, but it's clean. Quiet, controlled. There's a pride to it. You've never been around so many girls your age doing the same thing for the same purpose. You can talk about your periods and the president in the same breath. You can curse and giggle and cry, and nobody acts like it's out of place. In here, you're seen. And you are seen, not just by each other, but by everyone else in town. There's a certain reputation that comes with working at the radium plant. You're the shining girls, the ones who come home glittering like stars. People notice. Some admire it, some stare, some cross the street, but they all know what it means. You have a good job, an important job. You're helping win a war, and you're getting paid for it too. Enough to buy new coats, new hats, even little luxuries like perfume or stockings without holes. Your paycheck is heavier than most men's, at least the ones who stayed behind. That makes you feel powerful, grown up, almost untouchable. But there's something else too, something you don't talk about yet. A girl in the back missed a few days, said her jaw was sore. Another went home early, with a strange pain in her hips. You tell yourself it's nothing. Growing pains, maybe, or an infection. Factories are full of drafts. You get used to little aches. You keep painting. Keep lip pointing. Keep smiling with teeth that shine in the mirror when you turn off the lights. It's a party trick. It's patriotic. It's profitable. They say the paint is safe. They always say it's safe. Diploma lip paint. Repeat. That's your rhythm now. Not music, not prayer, just muscle memory. The brush moves without thinking, sliding into the tin of glowing paint, tapping lightly against the side to catch the excess, and then up to your lips. A twist, a press, and the tip is ready. Then it's down to the dial, numbers 1 through 12, each curve needing a steady hand and a sharp point. The bristles soften too quickly, without reshaping, so back to your lips again. Hundreds of times a day. You don't think about it anymore. It's just part of the job. like breathing, like blinking. You're good at it. All of you are. The girls who make it past the first week tend to stay for months, even years. The ones who can't keep up, who smear the paint or shake too much, they get reassigned or let go. But you've got the knack. They tell you that a lot, actually. Good work. Nice precision. Fast hands. They never say steady mouth, but they should. That's where all the control comes from. Your lips are more important than your fingers. They shape the tool that makes the work possible. There's a kind of pride in that. A twisted sort of intimacy between you and the brush. You kiss it more than you've kissed any boy. The day unfolds in segments you barely notice anymore. Morning shift, break, second shift. Home. You sit in the same spot, with the same tin of paint, under the same flickering overheads. Sometimes the light catches the dust just right, and the air looks full of stars. Floating, glowing motes that settle on your clothes, your lashes, your lunch. You barely blink at them now. The sparkle gets into everything. You breathe it. You taste it. Some days you find it on your pillow in the morning, evidence that whatever gets into your skin stays there. Not that anyone's worried. The supervisors say it's perfectly safe. That radium is healthy, restorative, a miracle of modern science. And why wouldn't you believe them? This is the element that put the glow in the dark. The marvel Marie Curie helped discover. People take radium pills now, for energy, for digestion, for vitality. There are spas where you can bathe in radium water, soothe your joints in radioactive steam. It's even in face creams. Radiate beauty, the ads say, and the girls in the posters don't look sick. They look flawless, timeless, alive. The newspapers run stories about radium's healing power, how it might cure cancer, reverse aging, even extend life. It's the future in powdered form. And you, lucky thing, are handling it every day. The managers love to talk about this, usually while leaning on your table with clean hands and fresh cuffs. They remind you how lucky you are, how many girls would kill for a spot like this, how safe the process is. Safer than sewing needles, one says with a smile. Another brags that the founders drink a little radium water every morning to keep their bones strong. Better than milk, he says. No one asks how long they've been doing that, or whether their teeth still glow in the dark. You nod, smile, go back to the brush. Sometimes, to break the monotony, one of the girls will crack a joke. A quiet comment passed between stations. Guess I'll live forever now. Glowing on the inside, just like they promised. You laugh because it's funny, and because it's easier than asking questions. You're young, and the world still feels soft around the edges, like you can press into it without breaking anything. If radium were really dangerous, surely someone would have said something. There'd be warnings, gloves, masks. Instead, there's music playing faintly from a radio in the corner, and posters of smiling women holding watches. No one talks about side effects. No one's pulled from the floor. It's just business as usual. The repetition gets to you sometimes, not physically, not yet, but mentally. You dream about numbers, tiny painted numbers that dance behind your eyes when you try to sleep. You wake up with your fingers curled as if holding a brush. Even when you close your eyes at work, you can see the green glow printed on the inside of your eyelids. It doesn't fade, it never fades, but there's something comforting about it, in its way. The consistency, the pattern, the fact that this tiny job, this invisible work has meaning beyond the factory walls. Some soldier somewhere will read your numbers in the dark and know what time it is. That thought keeps you going on the long days. You don't notice anything strange about your body. Not yet. Maybe your joints ache, but that could just be from sitting too long. Maybe you're more tired than usual, but that's probably just from working so hard. No one really talks about health beyond the usual colds and cramps. If anything was seriously wrong, someone would say something. And besides, everyone's glowing. If it were dangerous, wouldn't someone have dropped dead by now? There's comfort in routine, even when the routine is quietly killing you. You don't know that, of course. Not yet. You don't know that each time you lip point, you're pressing a little more poison into your tongue, that the radium doesn't just sit there. It seeps into your mouth, gets absorbed into your gums, your jaw, your blood. You don't know that your bones, your literal skeleton, has started to treat it like calcium, that it's building death into your structure molecule by molecule. It's too slow to see, too quiet to hear. There's no pain yet, just the rhythm. Diploma lip paint. Repeat. You joke that you'll start glowing in the dark without the paint. You don't know how right you are. It starts with a toothache, nothing dramatic, just a dull, persistent throb in your molar, the kind of ache you chalk up to chewing too hard or eating too many peppermints. You ignore it at first. Everyone gets toothaches. Maybe it's a cavity, maybe it's nothing. But it lingers, then it spreads. The ache shifts from one tooth to another, like it's trying to find the worst place to settle. Soon it's your whole jaw. It aches when you talk, when you eat, when you breathe too cold a breath. You tell yourself you're just tired, run down, working too much. You tell yourself it'll pass, but it doesn't. You go to the dentist when the pain becomes too sharp to ignore. Your gums are swollen now, bleeding easily when you brush, which you do less and less because every touch feels like a knife. The dentist pokes around with a mirror and a metal pick, frowning like he's looking at something unfamiliar. He doesn't say much, just hums and asks if you've been sick recently. You shake your head. He asks if you've injured your mouth or hit your jaw on anything. You haven't. He doesn't know what to make of it, prescribes some antiseptic mouthwash and says to come back in a week. If it doesn't improve, it doesn't. By the time you return, your breath has changed. You can taste it before anyone else smells it. That coppery, rotting tang that clings to the back of your throat, like pennies left in a wet sock. The pain is sharper now, hot and deep, pulsing through your skull at night. You don't sleep well. Your dreams are thick and muddled, your sheets damp with sweat. The dentist tries again, a different tooth this time, and when he touches it, the root gives way with a squelch that doesn't sound right. He looks surprised. He doesn't say it aloud, but you can see it in his eyes. He's never seen this before. The tooth comes out too easily. It's not pulled, it's lifted, like a piece of rotten fruit falling off the vine. There's no blood. Or rather, there is, but not where you'd expect. The socket beneath is soft, mushy, like the bone has been eaten from the inside. The dentist frowns deeper. He wipes his hands twice. He says something about infection and gives you more mouthwash, stronger this time. You nod and leave, your jaw still aching, your pocket lighter. It gets worse. Another tooth loosens. You run your tongue along it, obsessively, feeling the wiggle that shouldn't be there. You avoid talking too much now. Chewing becomes a chore. Your appetite fades, but your fatigue grows. Your legs feel heavy. Your joints throb when the weather turns. And always, the jaw. The centre of your pain. The anchor of your misery. It radiates now, a dull burn that creeps into your ear, down your neck, behind your eyes. You learn how to work around it, how to smile with your lips tight, how to chew only on the right side. You go back to work, still painting dials, still lip pointing, because what else are you supposed to do? Then comes the worst visit. You're back in the chair again, jaw swelling like a bruise, the pain almost constant now. The dentist touches your chin, frowns, then presses higher, and something gives, a small wet pop. You don't scream, but your body flinches like you've been burned. His hand is wet when he pulls it back. There's blood, yes, but more than that. A kind of black viscous ooze, thick and wrong, like your bone has melted into tar. You see something flicker across his face then. Not confusion, not concern, fear. He doesn't even use the pliers this time. He reaches into your mouth to inspect the socket, and when he presses gently against your lower gum, your jawbone lifts. Not a sliver, not a tooth. The entire left side of your mandible comes free in his hand, like a loose floorboard. You taste metal. You taste salt. You feel cold all over. The pain is so sharp it becomes distant, dull. You don't scream because you don't know how to process what's happening. You just sit there, mouth open, watching him cradle part of your face, like he's dropped a teacup and doesn't know how to put it back together. He tells you he's never seen anything like this. He says he'll write to someone, a specialist maybe, but you can hear the panic under his voice. He's scared. Not just for you, but for himself. Whatever this is, it's not normal. It's not dental. It's something else, something deeper. He tells you to rest, to avoid using that side of your mouth. You nod. You leave. You press your hand to your face in the mirror and feel the gap beneath your skin where bone used to be. It's soft there now. It shouldn't be. The girls at the factory are starting to whisper. You're not the only one hurting. Another girl has been out for weeks. Rumour is she lost her teeth too. Someone else collapsed on the stairs, her legs buckling like paper. You see bruises now on arms and ankles, strange ones that spread without impact. One girl says her spine hurts when she sits. Another limps, favouring her left side. You compare symptoms during breaks now, trading stories between bites of glowing sandwiches. It feels like some slow disease creeping through the room, and no one has a name for it. You go to a different doctor. He pokes, prods, hums thoughtfully. You try to explain the pain, the missing bone, the fatigue that clings to you like a second skin. He asks if you've been under stress, if you've experienced emotional disturbance, if it could be hysteria. You stare at him, too tired to laugh. You don't feel hysterical. You feel like you're disintegrating. He prescribes rest. He suggests tea. You leave with a headache and the quiet, heavy sense that no one is coming to help you. The factory hasn't said anything. They still expect you at your station, brush in hand. You show up. You need the money. Even as your jaw continues to soften, even as the smell of infection follows you like a shadow. You wear a scarf now, tucked high to hide the swelling. You keep your mouth closed in photos. You practice smiling without your teeth. You don't know the word for what's happening to you. You just know that your bones are vanishing, that your body feels hollow in places it used to feel solid, that something inside you is unraveling, and no one is telling you why. You taste metal every morning. You smell rot even after you bathe. You watch yourself disappear in the mirror, piece by piece, and wonder how much of you is left. You are now a medical mystery, not a patient, not a person, a curiosity, a case, an article waiting to be written. Doctors don't look at you with concern. They look at you like a riddle, a puzzle wrapped in skin. You lie back on examination tables under bright, cold lights, while men with moustaches and soft hands prod at your face, like it's made of clay. They tap your bones, or what's left of them. They peer into the black hollow of your mouth with gleaming tools. They murmur to each other, take notes, sometimes even sketch. They never ask how you're feeling. They ask when the symptoms started and whether you've been menstruating regularly, as if your uterus has anything to do with your jaw coming out in chunks. Most of the doctors don't know what to do with you. You're a working-class girl in a world run by men with degrees and waistcoats. They assume you're exaggerating, or mistaken, or both. When you say the pain started in your teeth and spread, they nod like they're humouring you. When you mention the glowing dust, the lip pointing, the strange smell that never washes off, they wave it away. That can't be it. The radium is harmless. They've read the pamphlets. They've seen the company's reports. Radium is progress, not poison. So they offer alternatives. You must have an infection, or anemia, or poor hygiene. One suggests scurvy. Another recommends jaw surgery, even though there's barely a jaw left to work with. They prescribe mouthwashes, poultices, and powders. You try them all because what else can you do? You want to believe that one of them might help, but nothing helps. The pain only gets worse and your body keeps unraveling. The doctors seem annoyed by this, as if your persistence is a personal insult to their education, as if you're being uncooperative by continuing to suffer. Eventually, one of them says it. The word you were dreading. Hysteria, the old catch-all. The drawer where doctors put everything they don't understand, especially when it happens to women. If you were a man, they might say nerve damage or neurological degeneration. But you're not. You're a girl with bad teeth and worse luck, and now you're hysterical. They say it gently, like they're offering a kindness. It might be psychological. You're under a great deal of stress. Try to rest. As if your jaw detached itself from trauma. As if your bones are rotting from emotional instability. The word spreads. You see it in the way nurses glance at you, pity mixed with suspicion. You hear it in your mother's voice when she says you should try not to make a fuss during appointments. You feel it in the way doctors stop looking you in the eye. You are no longer someone to help. You are someone to be dismissed, filed away. You're not dying of radium exposure. You're just sensitive, fragile, perhaps even delusional. And somehow that diagnosis sticks harder than any real one. You start to doubt yourself, not because you believe them, but because their confidence is louder than your pain. They wear white coats, you wear bandages, they speak in clinical terms, you stammer and bleed, you try to describe the way your bones feel like wet paper, the way your spine aches for no reason, the way your joints feel like they're filled with glass. They nod and take notes and tell you to eat more meat. Maybe try a tonic, get some fresh air. You are falling apart molecule by molecule, and their solution is a walk and a steak. They don't ask about the other girls, about the ones who worked beside you and are now missing teeth, walking with canes, coughing up blood. If you mention them, the doctors wave it off. Coincidence. A seasonal bug. Poor genetics. They ask if your mother had bad teeth. If your father drank. They don't believe in patterns unless the pattern starts in a lab and ends in a publication. You are not research. You're a footnote. Some of the men examining you don't seem indifferent. They seem excited. Not about your pain exactly, but about the mystery. They ask to take samples, photographs. They bring in students to observe. You become a specimen, an example of something rare and peculiar. There's a thrill to it for them. You're no longer just another girl with a paycheck and a pain in her jaw. You're a phenomenon, a thing they can put in a journal. You hear them argue over your case in the hallway, debating theories like schoolboys with a puzzle box. No one talks to you directly. You are the subject of conversation, not a participant. When they do speak to you, it's often with condescension. They use small words, reassuring tones, as if you're a child who doesn't understand her own body. They tell you not to worry. They say pain is normal. They smile too much. You start to recognize that smile. It's the one people use when they want to look kind, but need you to shut up. The smile that comes just before they push you out the door. Eventually, you stop asking for answers. Not because you don't want them, but because you've learned they're not coming. You sit through appointments in silence, nodding along, collecting slips of paper with treatments that do nothing. You spend more and more time in bed. The pain is constant now, not sharp, not stabbing, but heavy. Like you're carrying your own death around in your chest. You learn to move slowly, to hold your face still. You stop eating solid food. You drink through a straw when you can. Sometimes you hear about new studies, articles, men in suits arguing in meetings about whether radium could be harmful. No one calls to ask how you're doing. You're not a source, you're a symptom. And symptoms don't need follow-up. You're still working somehow, still going back to the factory on the days you can. You sit with your scarf tied high, hands steady even when your knees shake. The girls who haven't gotten sick yet still laugh during breaks. They still paint their nails with the dust. You don't stop them. What would you say? You're just one girl with a soft voice and soft bones, sitting in a room full of ticking dials and men who still insist that none of this is their fault. You are a mystery, which is a polite way of saying they don't know how to fix you, and an even politer way of saying they're not going to try. While your teeth loosen and your bones dissolve, the US Radium Corporation is doing better than ever. Business is booming. Orders are up. profits are climbing. The war helped, of course. The government couldn't get enough glow-in-the-dark watches for soldiers. But even in peacetime, people want things that shine. Dial painting isn't just a job anymore. It's an industry. And at the top of it all sit men in tailored suits and polished shoes who've never once dipped a brush or pointed it with their mouths. They smile for photographs. They speak at luncheons. They cash their bonuses. The only thing they risk exposure to is applause. Radium is having a moment. It's the miracle element of the modern age, the shimmering promise of progress in powdered form. It's not just for watches anymore. It's in toothpaste, so your smile can literally sparkle. It's in face cream, promising a youthful glow, though it never mentions the part where that glow comes from cell death. You can buy radium soap, radium suppositories, radium lingerie. There are children's toys that glow with radium paint, labelled as educational. There are cocktails infused with just a dash of radioactivity, for men who want to feel vital. Radium is health. Radium is beauty. Radium is power. That's the line anyway. The company puts out pamphlets about the benefits of radium, citing vague studies and even vaguer scientists. They quote doctors who claim it strengthens bones, energizes blood, revitalizes organs. They conveniently forget to mention that those doctors are often on the payroll. They hand out materials to workers, insisting the paint is safe. Safer than sewing, safer than factory dust, safer than anything else a girl like you might be doing for a living. And if any woman gets sick, well, it's probably from something else. Poor nutrition, bad genetics, personal weakness. Not from the product, never from the product. You and the other girls know better by now. You've seen too many friends go pale, then quiet, then vanish. You've watched jaws disappear, legs crumple, eyes yellow with something no one can name. You whisper about it in the break room. Some of the girls are scared, some just tired. But when you speak up, when you ask the foreman if maybe the paint could be causing harm, he laughs, actually laughs, like it's a joke. He says you've been listening to rumours, that you shouldn't be so dramatic, that you're imagining things. He says it kindly, as if patting a child on the head. Then he tells you to get back to work. The higher-ups know what's happening. That's the worst part. They know. Maybe not at first, not in the early months, when the cases trickled in too slowly to recognise the pattern. But they know now. They've read the reports. They've seen the symptoms. Their own scientists warned them. Quietly, cautiously, in internal memos and confidential letters, but they warned them all the same. And what did the executives do with that information? They buried it. They told the scientists not to publish. They reassured investors. They hired lawyers, because glowing profits are easier to protect than glowing girls. One of the company's physicians even tried to investigate, a man named Dr. Harrison Martland. He saw the decay, the broken jaws, the strange lesions. He conducted tests. He found radiation in the bones of the dead. He said the radium was eating them from the inside out. The company's response? Denial. They said his methods were flawed, that his data was biased, that the girls were probably sick before they started working here. After all, young women get tired. They faint. They're delicate. And besides, why would a respected company lie? Surely a company would never hide evidence to protect its bottom line. Surely it would never gaslight its own workers into thinking their suffering was imaginary. Surely it would never watch teenage girls rot alive and say, "Not our fault." That would be monstrous, unthinkable, immoral. And yet, here we are. They tell the press everything is fine. The radium is safe. The girls are exaggerating. It's just hysteria. That word again. A convenient diagnosis for anyone who's inconvenient. They hire experts to testify that there's no connection between the paint and the illnesses. They question your character. They ask about your past. They say, perhaps you're not as innocent as you seem. They do everything except take responsibility. Because if they admit even once that radium might be dangerous, the whole glowing empire falls apart. You still go to work because you have to. because the pain doesn't pay the bills, because you don't have savings or a husband with a salary or a family who can support you. You sit at your station with your scarf pulled high and your hands shaking slightly, painting numbers that will outlive you. The factory looks the same. Same tables, same brushes, same tins of shimmering dust. But the atmosphere is different now. There's tension behind the laughter, a stiffness in the shoulders, a quiet that wasn't there before. Some of the girls have stopped lip pointing, trying to play it safe, but it's too late for most of you. The damage is already deep, buried in bone, glowing softly beneath your skin. Outside the factory walls, the company is thriving. They open new locations, expand production, take out glossy ads in women's magazines, boasting of progress and prosperity. The executives toast to success at banquets, sipping champagne under chandeliers. They give speeches about innovation, about American excellence, about the bright future ahead. They never mention the girls in the back rows of the photographs, the ones missing teeth, the ones with canes, the ones who disappeared. You hear about lawsuits, whispered and distant. A few brave girls trying to get justice. The company scoffs. They say the claims are baseless, that it's impossible to prove anything. They delay the hearings, drag their feet, wait for the plaintiffs to get too sick to show up in court. It's cheaper that way. It always is. You used to think your job was important, that you were helping soldiers, building the future, making something beautiful. Now, all you've built is a coffin you can't afford. All you've made is money, not for yourself, but for men who never touch the brush. You're a casualty of capitalism with a ribbon in your hair, and they're still counting profits while you count your remaining teeth. Radium made the company rich. It made you glow, and then it made you disappear. You already know something's wrong, but the worst part isn't the sickness itself. It's the moment everyone stops pretending not to notice. There's no announcement, no memo, just a shift in the air, quiet as dust. Conversations get shorter, laughter thins out. The girls who used to hum while they worked don't bother anymore. It's not fear exactly, not yet. It's something lower, duller, a kind of bone-deep knowing. No one says it out loud because what would be the point? You're all living in the same slow-motion collapse. Why waste breath naming it? It's a strange kind of intimacy, this silent unraveling. You start learning things you never wanted to know. The way a girl's fingers tremble just before her shift starts, or how another limps more on Thursdays. When the swelling peaks, you learn to recognize the smell that means someone's bones have started to die. You know who's taking more sick days, and who's stopped going to the dentist altogether. It's not gossip anymore. It's fieldwork, survival. You share pain like rations, sparingly, carefully, only with those who've already earned it. Sometimes someone disappears. They're there on Friday, gone by Monday. No goodbye, no explanation. Just an empty seat and a name you don't say aloud for a few days, as if saying it too soon might make it permanent. The new girls take those seats, bright and unbothered, like it's all normal. You don't warn them anymore. What's the use? The truth doesn't stick until it starts growing inside you. Funerals become part of the rhythm. You go when you can. Stand at the back. Keep your gloves on. You don't cry, not because you're strong, but because it doesn't feel real until much later. When you're brushing your teeth and one of them comes loose in your hand, then it hits. Not just the death, but the inevitability. You remember the sound of her laugh. You remember her hands. You remember how she used to light up when she talked about leaving this town. She never did. Some of the girls write letters, some keep journals, a few talk about quitting, but never seriously. The job is poison, but it pays, and you need it. Rent doesn't wait for your jaw to fall off. Your little brother's shoes don't know your blood is radioactive, so you keep dipping, lip pointing if you're still capable. Painting numbers you'll never see glow in the dark, because your body already does. Eventually, there's a new kind of silence, not the hush of denial. That's gone. This one is heavier, full of facts everyone knows and no one says. The supervisors still smile like everything's fine. They still say good work when you hit your quota. But they don't linger anymore. They don't meet your eyes, they're not blind, just busy pretending they are. You start wondering how many of them know exactly what's happening, how many meetings they've had about you, how many reports they've buried. You talk less now. Everyone does. Not because you don't care, but because you're conserving something. Breath, energy, hope, maybe all three. There's a girl across the table who coughs through her entire shift. You used to ask if she was okay. Now you just pass her the water without a word. She nods. That's enough. That's all you've got. And still the factory hums. The paint glows. The numbers stack up. You keep going. Not because you believe it's safe, but because there's no exit ramp. You're already inside the thing that's killing you. All you can do is slow the bleeding. There's no more mystery, really. Just math. Who's next? How long? What will go first? Your spine, your teeth, your memory? You stop picturing a future. Stop planning weekends. Your world shrinks down to aches and hours, and how many times you can stand up before your knees give out. You stop expecting anything but pain. But even as your body fails you, something else sharpens. Not rage, not yet, just clarity. You see the system now naked and plain. The way it chews girls up like raw material. The way it spits them out and hires new ones without blinking. You realise that they never planned to protect you. That they only valued what you could produce, not whether you survived the process. And you understand, finally, that none of this was accidental. You still go to work, you still sign the log, but something in you has changed. The factory didn't notice, the paint didn't notice, but you did. And you can't go back to not knowing. Turns out radium is safe, just not for you. That's the quiet truth hiding beneath all the smiling ads and glowing watch faces. The science, the real science, knew long before your jaw came loose, long before the funerals and the lawsuits and the bones that crumbled like stale bread. The warnings weren't shouted from rooftops, no, but they were written. They were tested. They were whispered behind closed doors in lab coats and boardrooms. The danger was never entirely unknown. It was just inconvenient. The early studies weren't conclusive, not at first, but they were worrying. French researchers observed the strange effects in animals exposed to radium dust. Bone lesions, growths, unexplained deaths. Some American scientists, too, started asking questions about what happened when the substance got inside the body. The answers weren't pretty, but they were technical, complex, buried in jargon, and more importantly, easy to ignore when profits were on the line. After all, why panic the public when a little creative optimism would do? What's more telling is what the men did with this information, not what they said, what they did. In laboratories across the country, male chemists handling radium samples began wearing gloves, masks, lead aprons. They used long-handled tools to avoid skin contact. They worked behind shields, storing samples in lead-lined boxes, using tongs instead of fingers. They marked vials with hazard warnings. The precautions were quiet, but they were there. The message was clear: radium is dangerous. But not dangerous enough to stop handing it to young women with no medical training and no protection, as long as the numbers kept glowing and the orders kept rolling in. You, of course, were told it was harmless. You were told it was healthy. They said it with a smile and a straight face. Some even went further, saying it promoted vitality, boosted circulation, increased feminine glow. They encouraged you to keep using your lips to shape the brush, even after the first reports of illness surfaced. They told you the girls who got sick must have had other problems, that it couldn't be the paint, that your glowing hands and glowing breath were signs of patriotism, not poison. Like handing asbestos to schoolchildren and calling it a craft hour. It wasn't just lies, it was indifference. A calculated silence. The executives, the scientists, the doctors on the company's payroll, they weren't all malicious. Some may have even believed the nonsense they were paid to repeat. But others knew enough to take precautions themselves. knew enough to protect the men in the labs while leaving you to stir paint with your mouth. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. A quiet kind of violence made up of shrugs and denials and politely worded memos. You find out later that Marie Curie herself, the woman who helped discover radium, warned against excessive exposure. She handled it carefully, respectfully, always aware that it might carry consequences. Her notebooks, decades after her death, are still too radioactive to handle without gear, and yet no one at your factory thought to mention that. No one thought to wonder what might happen when hundreds of girls inhaled and ingested the stuff daily. Or worse, they wondered and didn't care. It's hard to say which is more insulting, the lie or the laziness. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's the fact that your body was treated like an acceptable risk, a test subject without consent. They didn't run clinical trials. They didn't publish studies on workplace exposure. They just waited to see what happened to you. And when the results came in, they folded them up and filed them away under bad luck. Your decaying jaw, your aching spine, your softening bones. None of that was enough to change anything. You begin to understand that the company didn't need to silence you. They just needed to wait. Most of you wouldn't last long enough to make noise. The sickness was slow but relentless, like a tide wearing a waystone. You'd vanish one by one, quietly and without incident. And if anyone asked, they could always point to a family history, or a bad diet, or hysteria. Science doesn't lie, but the people interpreting it do, especially when their salaries depend on the narrative. What stings isn't just the betrayal, it's the precision of it, the way the truth was carefully sliced away from the public version. You picture the lab workers with their gloves and masks, storing radium in lead boxes while you painted it onto your teeth for fun. You think about the scientists who nodded solemnly at internal reports and then stood silent when girls like you came begging for answers. You think about the doctors who accepted company funding and handed out pamphlets that said, "Don't worry, dear, it's perfectly safe." All the while, you kept dipping and lip pointing and glowing in the dark. You didn't know your bones were collecting radium like a bank collects debt. You didn't know that the green shimmer under your skin was the result of atomic decay, not beauty, not vitality, just the slow whisper of death rearranging your cells. And the people who did know, they kept quiet, not because they had to, because they chose to. There's no anger in your voice, not anymore, just exhaustion. Betrayal has a way of wearing you down into something quieter than rage. You're too tired to be furious. You just want someone to admit it, not even to fix it, just to say it, to acknowledge that you were used, discarded, and buried beneath a glowing lie that everyone else saw coming. But no one ever says it out loud. They let the science speak for itself eventually, long after it's too late for you. Turns out radium is safe, just not for the girls who trusted the people handing it to them. You never planned to be brave. No one really does. You were just trying to survive, to keep showing up, to keep the pain from swallowing you whole. But something inside you starts to shift, slowly at first, then all at once. Maybe it's the funeral that finally breaks you. The one with the closed casket and the mother who wouldn't stop screaming. Or maybe it's the way the factory keeps hiring fresh-faced girls without telling them the truth. Maybe it's the way your bones grind when you move, the way your skin has turned the colour of old wax, the way your name is already slipping out of memory while the company's profits keep climbing. Whatever it is, you're done being quiet. You're done being polite. You're still dying, but you're not going to do it silently. You start to ask questions, not just the whispered ones at work, but real questions, to real people, with pens and desks and something resembling power. You write letters. You push your way into doctors' offices that once dismissed you. You speak up at meetings where you weren't invited. And when they don't listen, when they smile tightly and hand you another pamphlet or another lie, you decide it's time for something louder. You're going to sue, not just complain, not just plead, but fight, on paper, in public, with names and dates and signatures. You don't know if it'll help. You just know you can't let them erase you. You're not the only one. Others are waking up too through the haze of pain and betrayal. There's Grace Fryer, thin, pale, spine curved like a question mark, but with a voice that cuts like glass. She worked at the Orange, New Jersey plant and started showing symptoms just like you. Loose teeth, aching joints, a body folding in on itself. For years she tried to find a lawyer. Most refused to take her case. Too risky, too costly, too unladylike, but she didn't stop. Eventually she found someone who would listen, someone who could help her drag the US Radium Corporation into the light. Then there's Catherine Schaub, and Quinta MacDonald, and Edna Hussman, and Albina Larice. One by one, they step forward. Women whose bodies have become evidence, whose pain has started to write its own testimony. They're tired, they're broken, and they're furious. These aren't courtroom regulars. They're not lawyers or activists or revolutionaries. They're dial painters, sisters, daughters, women who wanted jobs and got death instead. And now they're ready to speak. You join them. Of course you do. Even though you can barely walk, even though your jaw is a ruin, even though your hands don't always grip the pen the way they used to. You sign your name anyway. You show up when you can. When you can't stand, you sit. When you can't sit, you lie back and speak from a stretcher. You don't have the strength to shout, but you don't need to. The truth carries its own volume. Every word that comes out of your mouth is heavier than anything the company can spin. The company fights back, viciously, predictably. They call you liars. They say you're exaggerating. They claim you're trying to scam them for money, as if money could buy back your health, your teeth, your youth. They say you're unstable, emotional, hysterical, that word again, dragged out like a club every time a woman dares to complain. They attack your character, your family, your femininity, as if a respectable girl would know better than to raise her voice in court, as if dying quietly would be more dignified. Newspapers pick up the story. Some write with sympathy, others with skepticism. Some articles describe you and the others as crippled beauties, as if your suffering only matters because you were once pretty. They print photos of you in veils, in wheelchairs, mouths hidden behind scarves. You become symbols, martyrs, curiosities. Strangers send letters, some filled with support, others with bile. You're told you're brave. You're told you're a disgrace, but no one denies that something is wrong. Not anymore. The trial begins, it drags on, and on, and on. The company delays, disputes, denies. They file motions. They stall for months, hoping time will do their work for them. Hoping that by the time the judge is ready to hear your case, you'll be too dead to testify. It's not a strategy, it's a countdown. You're not just a plaintiff. You're a race against the clock. Testifying isn't what you expected. The courtroom smells like paper and old wood. The lawyers speak slowly, carefully, like each word is a coin they're afraid to spend. You're helped to the stand. Your body is weak, your voice is soft. But you tell the truth about the job, about the paint, about the way your teeth fell out one by one, about the nights you woke up choking on blood, about the smell that lingers no matter how hard you scrub. You speak not just for yourself, but for the girls who are gone, the ones who never got to tell their story, the ones buried under numbers and silence. The defense tries to rattle you. They ask about your personal life. They question your memory. They bring in their own doctors, who use long clinical terms and carefully controlled tones to say that maybe, possibly, it wasn't the paint. Maybe it was anemia, maybe syphilis, maybe the flu, anything but the thing that everyone in the room already knows. The truth hangs in the air like smoke, thick, toxic, undeniable. You sit through it all, you endure. You endure because there's no other choice, because someone has to, because you want the world to hear what the company has done, and more importantly, what it refused to do. You want them to know that radium didn't kill you. Not really. What killed you was greed and silence, and the decision made by people with clean hands, to do nothing while your body burned from the inside out. You never meant to become part of history, but now you are. Not just as a victim, not just as a name on a list, but as a voice, a lawsuit, a symbol of what happens when the truth is buried deeper than the dead. You're still dying, but now you're doing it loudly, publicly, with your name in the paper and your testimony on record. And for the first time in a long time, they have to listen, even if they don't want to, even if it's already too late. The courtroom isn't built for dying women. That much becomes obvious the moment they wheel you in. The benches are too hard, the lighting too harsh, and everything smells faintly of mildew and male confidence. You're laid out on a stretcher, bundled in blankets, your skin the pale grey of wax paper, and your breath shallow enough to be mistaken for sleep. You're not trying to make a scene. You don't have the energy to. This is simply the only way you can attend. You can't sit up anymore. You can barely eat, but you can still speak. And that, it turns out, is more threatening than anything else. The defense hates it. Your presence, your bones, your voice. They hate that the jury has to look at you and see what Radium did when left unchecked. They claim you're here just for sympathy, as though your jaw detached itself for dramatic effect. Their lawyers, crisp in dark suits, suggest that the stretcher is a tactic, that the weight loss, the bandages, the wheezing are all part of some macabre theatre. The implication is clear. You're not just sick, you're manipulative. The pain is real, sure, but conveniently real. Time to align with court dates, time to garner pity, timed as if you had any control over how quickly your body's dissolving. They call in witnesses, scientists, doctors, men with important titles and neatly combed hair, who explain very calmly that your suffering might not be from radium, that perhaps your condition is a coincidence, that decay, after all, happens to everyone eventually. They suggest it might be anemia, tuberculosis, or when they're feeling especially bold, female nervous disorder. One even implies that the stress of testifying could be worsening your condition. The room doesn't laugh, but you can feel the disbelief ripple through it. The company's strategy is simple. Stall, deny, repeat. Every motion is met with a counter-motion. Every hearing is postponed. They contest evidence, challenge expert witnesses, argue over jurisdiction. They claim the statute of limitations has passed, as though you should have known your bones were rotting the day you first picked up the brush. They drag their feet on purpose, because time is on their side. Time is always on the side of those who aren't dying. And yet, the women come, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, some with empty smiles that used to hold teeth. You're not the only one to testify from a stretcher. Grace Fryer does too. Her back so twisted she can't sit upright. Her voice is thin, but it carries. She talks about her work, about the pride she felt, about the day her jaw began to ache and didn't stop. She talks about what it's like to live in a body that's becoming less and less hers. She does it without bitterness. Just fact, just history, spoken aloud before it's erased. Each woman who takes the stand brings more than testimony. She brings evidence in scars, in scans, in medical reports and x-rays that show the shadow decay hiding in her bones. Some are missing jaws, some are missing hope. But they show up anyway. They speak plainly. They tell the truth. It's not a polished performance. It's not grand or theatrical. It's quiet, grim, real. And that's what makes it powerful. Not because they're actresses, but because they're not. The public is watching now. Newspapers send sketch artists and columnists. Some are sympathetic. Some treat it like a circus. You read headlines that describe you and the others as living skeletons, radioactive beauties, glowing ghosts. The coverage is fascinated by your condition, your appearance, your tragic novelty, less so by the facts. One article calls you a gruesome warning. Another wonders aloud whether you're exaggerating for the sake of notoriety. No one questions the company's sincerity with the same frequency. You'd laugh at the irony if it didn't hurt so much to smile. The courtroom demands evidence, order, and time. Your body is providing all three, just not on their schedule. The legal system moves slowly, but Radium doesn't. Every week someone grows weaker, someone else drops out of the trial because she can no longer make the journey. Another dies. It's not a metaphor. It's not drama. It's just logistics. The plaintiffs are vanishing. You're fighting a case that might outlast you. You learn to live in limbo, waiting for rulings, waiting for hearings, waiting for death. The days stretch into months. You fill the time with medications that don't help, newspapers that don't tell the whole truth, and letters from strangers, some kind, some cruel. You wonder what will be left when this ends. If it ends, if you'll still be here to see it. You're not even sure what justice looks like anymore. Money? Accountability? A simple apology? One day, while lying on the courtroom stretcher, you glance at one of the company's attorneys. He looks bored. He taps his pen, shifts in his seat, jots down a note with a frown. You realise with a strange sort of clarity that he doesn't hate you. He doesn't even think about you. You're not a person to him. You're a case, a problem to solve, a cost to mitigate. You wonder if he'll remember your name in 10 years. You hope he does, not because you want to haunt him, just because someone should. The trial continues. The company digs in its heels. But your testimony, and the testimony of those beside you, starts to turn the tide. Not because the system works, but because your condition is impossible to ignore. You don't look like someone inventing illness. You look like someone who won't live to see her next birthday. And that carries weight, even in a room full of lawyers. By the end of it, you've given more than your story. You've given your time, your strength, your last reserves of energy. And still, the court is unsure. The law doesn't move on pity. It moves on precedent. You've made your case, but whether it's enough is out of your hands now. They can keep debating. You can't. So you lie back. You close your eyes, you wait. The courtroom talks on without you. The company keeps denying. The press keeps spinning. But your voice, cracked and thin and tired, has already been heard. You may be dying, but for once you're not invisible. You win. Technically. The papers call it a victory, a triumph for the working woman, a hard-earned blow against corporate greed. They print your name, your face, your story. The headlines use words like justice and courage. There are cheers in the courtroom when the judge announces the ruling. The company is ordered to compensate you and the other girls. They have to admit, not guilt exactly, but liability. A quiet, clinical word that means, we didn't do anything wrong, but we will pay you to stop talking about it. It should feel satisfying. It doesn't. The settlement is modest, a lump sum, plus a small monthly payment for the rest of your life, which, the lawyers note, is not expected to be very long. It's not enough to cover the years of treatment you've already endured, let alone the bills that keep coming. There are surgeries that still haven't been done, medications you can't afford, equipment you'll never see. By the time the check clears, your spine aches too much to sit upright, and your jaw is long gone. You need help getting dressed. You need help eating. You need help dying. And still, they call it a victory. There are celebrations in places you can't reach. Legal scholars write essays. Women's groups applaud the precedent. Labour activists mention your name in pamphlets and protests. You are a symbol now, not of suffering but of resistance. A cautionary tale wrapped in a ribbon of resilience. People love symbols. They're easier to talk about than real people. Easier to mould into whatever lesson is most convenient. You don't blame them. Not really. You know how stories get rewritten, how victories are cleaned up, polished, stripped of their cost. They want to believe something changed, that your pain meant something, that the next generation of workers won't be sacrificed for someone else's bottom line. And maybe, in small ways, they're right. Maybe a law will pass. Maybe an inspector will be hired. Maybe some other girl in some other factory will get a warning you never did. It doesn't fix you, but it's something. Still, the timing stings, because while the legal system finally delivers its carefully worded judgment, your body has already delivered its own. The decay hasn't stopped. If anything, it's gotten worse. Your bones crumble like chalk under pressure. You can't hold a pencil without your fingers locking. Your skin bruises from the weight of a blanket. You don't walk anymore. You barely speak. The courtroom gave you a settlement, but time took everything else. The company, of course, doesn't admit fault, not in any meaningful way. Their public statement is vague, full of regret but void of responsibility. They express sympathy for your condition. They promise to evaluate internal procedures. They never say the word radium. They never say your names. And within a few months, they're back to business as usual, quietly rebranding, moving operations, shifting focus. A few executives retire early. A few lawyers get promoted. Life goes on, just not for you. Public attention fades fast. After the verdict, reporters move on to fresher tragedies. There are new headlines to chase, new disasters to frame in bold type. People stop writing letters. The crowds outside the courthouse disappear. Even your neighbours, once eager to ask how the case was going, stop bringing it up. No one wants to talk about sickness after the story's over. They want happy endings, or none at all. New victims appear. Men this time, scientists, factory supervisors, even executives. People who are never supposed to be in danger. They begin showing symptoms. Radiation sickness. Bone fractures. Some even die. Suddenly there's a flurry of attention. Studies get funded, laws get proposed. Now it's serious. Now it's a crisis. You want to scream, but your voice is too weak. You want to ask why it took men to suffer before people took the problem seriously. But no one's listening anymore. You fade quietly, not dramatically, not all at once, just slowly, like background noise being turned down. You stop being invited to interviews. Your name stops appearing in articles. People still mention the Radium girls, but rarely as individuals. You become a plural, a story, a warning sign, a case file, and eventually a footnote. Even the settlement you fought for becomes a historical trivia point. Did you know the Radium girls won a lawsuit? Yes, but most of them were already dead by then. Sometimes you dream about the factory, not the real one, but the version that lives in your memory. Cleaner, brighter, full of laughter and glowing dust. You see the girls again, the ones who left too soon. They're young, whole, untouched by the rot. You sit at your station, brush in hand, and for a moment you forget what comes next. Then you wake up to the taste of metal and the sound of your own breath rattling against your ribs. The people around you try to be kind. They say you are brave. They say you made a difference. They say history will remember you, but you know better. History remembers what it wants, and it always forgets quietly. You're not a statue or a headline. You're just a girl who painted numbers until her bones fell apart. A girl who asked for help and was told to wait. A girl who won technically, but never got to enjoy it. The world keeps turning. The clocks you painted keep ticking. The numbers still glow in the dark, steady and silent, untouched by time. Somewhere, someone looks at their watch and smiles, never knowing what it cost, and somewhere else you lie still beneath a worn blanket. The court papers folded neatly in a drawer, and wait for everything else to stop glowing. You die glowing, not figuratively, not metaphorically, literally. The radium in your bones will outlast your grave. Your teeth might fall out, your skin might turn to paper, your jaw might rot into memory, but that faint green shimmer, that will still be there, long after the service, long after the flowers wilt, long after the name on your headstone fades, assuming you even got one. In a strange way, that glow becomes your legacy. Not your smile, not your dreams, not the life you tried to build, just the glow. You don't live to see what you started. You don't hear the words occupational disease spoken in courtrooms. You don't see the safety posters pinned to factory walls. You don't get to sit through the hearings where men in clean suits explain how the bones of young women taught them to regulate chemical exposure. That all comes later. You're still dead, of course. But at least now, there's a law saying what happened to you probably shouldn't happen again. A small victory, if you squint. The lawsuits drag on for years, long after your last breath, and eventually, someone listens. Not because they care, because they're afraid. Afraid of liability, afraid of headlines, afraid that the next dying girl might live long enough to testify again. The laws don't pass out of empathy, they pass out of calculation, but they pass. And that's something. You don't benefit from any of it. You're already buried, but your bones and what they reveal under x-rays keep showing up in meetings and memos and reports labelled urgent. The Radium girls become a precedent, a talking point, a footnote in labour law textbooks and chemical safety seminars. You, specifically, are never named. Not unless someone really digs. You're a composite in the eyes of history, one of the nameless, interchangeable girls who glowed, who suffered, who proved a point. But the point stuck. Workplace safety gets new teeth. Corporations learn that silence won't always protect them. Regulators begin to take radiation exposure seriously. Not quickly, not generously, but eventually. And only because of you. OSHA doesn't come into existence until the 1970s, decades after you're gone. They'll cite cases like yours when explaining why factories now have hazard labels and eye wash stations and rules against licking brushes dipped in death. They'll call it progress. You might call it too late, but at least the next girl who walks into a lab with glowing paint won't be told to put it in her mouth for precision. She'll have goggles, gloves, maybe even training, luxury you never had. Of course, not everything changes. Companies still lie, executives still deflect. Whistleblowers still get smeared. And every so often, someone invents a new miracle substance that's definitely safe this time, until it isn't. But now there's precedent, thanks to you. Thanks to the lawsuits that crawled forward on crutches. Thanks to the x-rays that turned your skeleton into evidence. Thanks to the testimony you gave while coughing up pieces of yourself. Some people remember, a historian, a lawyer, a science teacher who assigns your case to her class during a unit on ethics, but most don't. They chew gum made with artificial sweetener that was once tested on lab rats and wonder aloud if regulations are too strict these days. They complain about warning labels on ladders. They read Radium Girls on a book cover in a store and assume it's fiction. They never say your name, they never knew it. But the systems are safer now. Not perfect, just better. Workers have more rights. Medical records get reviewed. Factories get inspected. All of this happens in the shadow of your bones. All of it is paid for by the teeth you lost, the breath you couldn't catch, the hours you painted dials, while your insides crumbled. You don't get a thank you, just a line in a policy binder that says what you endured is now considered preventable. As if that makes it better. Sometimes they exhume your body. Years later, decades even, for science, for studies, for exhibits. They're amazed by the glow, how long it lasts, how deep it goes, how perfectly it preserved the damage. You don't get a choice in that either. You're still being used, still teaching lessons, still illuminating the cost of carelessness in the most literal way possible. Your skeleton becomes a cautionary tale, a glowing one. If it sounds like a bleak legacy, that's because it is. You died young. You died in pain. You died after being lied to, blamed and dismissed. No plaque makes up for that. No lawsuit really settles it. But here's what you leave behind. Evidence. change, a crack in the system where light got in, a warning sign glowing on the floor of history. You were not a scientist, you were not famous, you weren't given choices, but in dying the way you did, loudly, visibly, unwilling to go quietly, you changed something. You made them look. You made them rewrite the rules. And even if they forgot your name, they didn't forget the cost. So yes, you're still dead, but the world that killed you had to change to explain why. And that might be the closest thing you get to justice. Now they care, not because of you or the other girls, or the funerals that stacked up like broken clock faces, but because men might be at risk too. That's when things begin to shift. Not when teenage girls started losing their jaws, or when you testified from a stretcher. Not when the newspapers printed pictures of your missing teeth, or when doctors started quietly measuring radium in your bones. No, it starts when someone realizes the danger isn't limited to the back rooms of the dial painting factory. It might spread. It might reach them. Suddenly the laboratories take notice. Men in lab coats who once handed out radium samples like party favours begin wearing gloves and masks more consistently. Scientists start speaking in firmer tones about occupational exposure and long-term toxicity. The journals that once tiptoed around the issue begin printing bolder headlines. The same companies that dismissed your symptoms as hysteria now begin quietly reviewing safety protocols. The paint is reformulated, the lip-pointing method is abandoned. Warning labels are introduced. It all looks like progress, but it smells like fear. This isn't guilt, this is liability. The people in charge don't act because your bones dissolved. They act because someone with a pension might be next. A chemist gets sick. A factory inspector begins coughing up blood. A senior executive develops lesions. These men didn't dip brushes or work for pennies an hour. They weren't discarded as easily. Their sickness brings something yours never did. Accountability. When you got sick, they called it an unfortunate coincidence. When he gets sick, it's a crisis. The shift isn't dramatic. It's gradual, slow, buried under paperwork and public statements, but it happens. Workplace safety becomes a subject worth investigating. Radium is treated with more caution. Factories change their procedures, not because it's the right thing to do, but because legal teams advise them to. Manuals are rewritten. Insurance policies are updated. New hires are given safety lectures that weren't even imagined when you were on the factory floor. Your suffering is suddenly useful, not for compassion, but for precedent. They start calling it a turning point. That's the phrase that shows up in textbooks when they mention you at all. The Radium Girls marked a turning point in American labour history. It sounds neat, tidy, like it happened on purpose, like you chose to die so that others could live. But that's not what happened. You were poisoned, ignored, and gaslit until you sued the people who let it happen. And only then did they decide to care. They didn't listen until they were afraid the damage might reach their own front doors. Decades later, long after you and most of the other women are buried, the United States creates OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It's 1970. Most of your families are already gone. Your factories are either repurposed or demolished. Your names are fading from memory. But in boardrooms and bureaucratic offices, someone finally codifies what should have been obvious: that workers have the right not to be slowly murdered on the job. OSHA passes rules about chemical exposure, about protective gear, about accountability. They talk about workers' rights, workplace deaths, and industrial illnesses. Some of the regulations even mention radium, not directly, not by name, but the implications are there. They don't thank you. They don't need to. History doesn't require gratitude, just precedent. You've become a stepping stone, a case study. Your decayed jawbones and collapsed spines serve as fuel for reform. The industry uses your story to show how far it's come. They speak of you like an old disease, long cured, safely behind glass. They bring up your case during training videos and lectures, nodding solemnly as they explain how such a thing would never happen today. And maybe that's true. Maybe because of what happened to you, another girl somewhere gets handed a pair of gloves. Maybe a foreman thinks twice before telling a teenage worker to put something in her mouth. Maybe someone reads your name on a PowerPoint slide and pauses for half a second. It's not much, it's not enough, but it's more than you ever got. Radiation makes a great headline. Even now, the word still crackles with fascination. Documentaries get made, novels are written, tour guides point to the old factory lots and murmur that this is where the Radium girls once worked. They use the word girls always, as if you never aged, as if you stayed frozen in your youth, glowing forever in some haunted snapshot. They never say women, they never say victims, they rarely say your names. There are plaques in a few places, small ones, easy to miss. They call you pioneers, they praise your courage. They forget that you weren't trying to make a point, you were trying to survive. They speak as if you were martyrs when, in fact, you were workers. Teenage girls mostly, some married, some barely grown, all of you just trying to earn a wage. And now, decades later, your tragedy has been shaped into something inspiring. It's cleaner that way, easier to digest. You made history. Not because you wanted to, because they gave you no other choice. You turned your pain into proof, your disintegration into a courtroom record. The very thing that killed you became the reason someone else might be spared, and for that, they say, you changed the world. But change is a strange thing. It never arrives in time for the people who needed it most. It only settles in after the graves have been filled. They care now, because they had to, because the problem grew too large to ignore, because your bones whispered too loudly from beneath the ground. And even now, they care just enough, not to remember you properly, not to carry your story in full, but to keep your legacy folded neatly into a training manual somewhere, tucked between rules and regulations. A warning label in human form. You are the proof, you are the experiment, you are the lesson they refused to learn until it bled into the skin of men. And even then, they called it progress. You can rest now, not because everything is better, not because justice arrived in time, but because you've already given more than anyone had the right to ask. You've endured the kind of pain that splits a life into two halves, before and after. You've spoken your truth to people who didn't want to hear it, to courts that stalled, to doctors who shrugged, and to a world that forgot you as soon as the headlines faded. You fought when you could barely walk. You testified when your jaw was gone. You outlived their patience, even if you didn't outlive the damage. No one ever thanked you, not properly, not in the way that would have mattered. You didn't get parades or pensions or medals pinned to a frail chest. You didn't get an apology from the men who signed the memos that led to your decay. You weren't invited to ribbon cuttings or remembered on anniversaries. The world moved on, like it always does, fast, thoughtless, looking forward. And yet, behind all that movement, behind the reforms and safety regulations and polished speeches about workplace rights, there is your shadow. There is your glow, because you weren't alone. That's the part people forget. You were one of hundreds, one of thousands, girls with steady hands and easy smiles, girls who laughed in factory lunchrooms and painted their nails with radium dust for fun, girls who brought home their paychecks and unknowingly carried death in their marrow. Most of you died quietly, in rented rooms or overworked hospitals, long before the courts cared or the newspapers noticed. Your names were never printed, your faces never drawn, but you were part of it just the same, a constellation of lives that burned out to light the path forward. There's no comfort in that. Not really. Knowing that your pain made someone else safer doesn't heal the holes in your bones. It doesn't make up for the time you lost, the meals you couldn't chew, the sleep you never got back. But it means something. It has to. Somewhere, a girl works in a factory, and isn't told to put poison in her mouth. Somewhere, a man in a lab puts on gloves without having to wonder why. Somewhere, a manager chooses to err on the side of caution because he's been told a story about a woman who glowed in the dark and then died. Your name may not have made it into textbooks, your face may not hang in museums, but you change things. Quietly, brutally, permanently. You taught the world something it didn't want to learn, that silence can kill and that profit always comes at a cost. You proved that even the smallest voices, the weakest bodies, the most ignored workers, they matter. And they leave marks, glowing ones. Now it's quiet. Not courtroom quiet or hospital quiet, but real quiet. The kind that settles after the fight is over and there's nothing left to resist. The kind that feels like both peace and surrender. You don't have to explain yourself anymore. You don't have to convince anyone. The truth doesn't need your permission now. It's out there, carried on paper, in law, in bone. It's been buried with you, and yet it lives. You were never trying to make history. You just wanted to work, to help your family, to afford your own coat, to be a part of something important. And in the end you were, just not the way anyone expected. You became the caution, the lawsuit, the lesson. You became the reason some future girl was spared. And that matters, even if it didn't save you. You've done enough. Let the world spin without you. Let the ticking watches count time for someone else. Let the glow fade. You're not forgotten. Not entirely. There are whispers in classrooms. Memorial plaques that say too little. Documentaries watched late at night by strangers who blink at the screen and wonder how it was ever allowed to happen. They say, how awful. They say, can you imagine? And no, they can't. Not really, but they try. That's something. And somewhere out there, far from the factories, far from the courtrooms and the graves, your numbers still glow in the dark. Faint, steady, haunting. The paint you placed with such care still clings to antique watches and old military equipment, untouched and unread. You didn't live long enough to be remembered for your artistry. But it's there, in green numerals, in quiet luminescence, a trace of you that time hasn't erased. You didn't choose this ending. You didn't ask for it, but it's yours. And it deserves to be seen clearly, not romanticized, not softened. You were a worker, a daughter, a friend. You were alive. You were poisoned. You were buried, but not erased. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a tale of triumph, but of slow, glowing decay, wrapped in silence and lawsuits. If you're still awake, thank you for walking through history with me. If you'd like early access to more soft-spoken descents into history's quieter horrors, plus other perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, the Patreon link is in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment about the moment you realise justice sometimes arrives only after the obituary. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a review helps these forgotten stories find new ears. Sleep well.